want to get your thoughts on the Dabo Swinney comments that he made yesterday, but I don't know if necessarily what he said that is getting people all in a tizzy, or is it the fact that he said anything at all? In other words, even if you agree with what he's saying, which I happen to agree with what he's saying, I know what his gripe is and I agree with it. But at some point, the people's gripe with Dabo Swinney is you need to know when to take the high road, right? And he doesn't seem to know when to do that, if ever. So I want to get your thoughts on it first, and then I'll go into how I feel about it.
Well, I'll start out by saying that I have not listened to Dabo Swinney's full rant, which was about 4 minutes. Yes. You posted it. Mm-hmm. I got all my information from one article in particular on ESPN. Read that entire article, which was pretty lengthy, explained the situation. So I don't know what I'm missing out of Dabo, because I know, for example, when he went off after the South Carolina game last year about being disrespected, not ranked high enough, or not ranked and considered with other teams, and the conference was being downplayed and all that, I got a different perspective once I listened to his complete take on it versus reading the article. So I just read the article on this. So if the ACC is much like the Big Ten, they came out originally, laid out all the guidelines, said, we've got very safe guidelines here. Everybody's confident in them, and all the schools are going to adhere to these guidelines. So as a member of the ACC, you kind of go along with saying, okay, we trust the conference, and we're instituting the guidelines, and we're at least meeting their standard, if not taking it to another degree here in our football program. And if they state that the guidelines have been met and we still are eligible to play a game today, then we should go ahead and play the game. Wisconsin did that 2 weeks in a row with Nebraska and with Purdue, where the appearance was, well, they had already lost their starting quarterback. Now they've lost Graham Mertz, the backup quarterback, and his backup. So they're down to a 4-string quarterback. So they probably don't want to play. And the Big Ten came out, and I don't know if the ACC did the same originally before the season was started, and said, these are the guidelines, but we are still giving the option to the school or the football program to say, even though we've met all the criteria, we still don't feel comfortable playing for reasons A, B, or C. And so I think that's what basically happened here, is that Florida State does have this. They obviously have this right, this option to not play based on whatever their own criteria is versus meeting the ACC guidelines. I don't think that option should be given to the teams. I think the conference should have standards, just like they do every week playing football. And if those standards are met from a health perspective, then you need to show up and play the game.
Right. The problem, if you're Florida State, is that there's already been a precedent set for this at your own university. So a couple of weeks ago, I think it was on November 7th, if I'm not mistaken, that was the Saturday, the game day, when Pitt traveled down to Tallahassee, the same exact thing happened. They had a player that traveled with the team that got tested the day before on Friday. Once they got to Tallahassee, they got the results back. They didn't find out till 2:30 that afternoon that one player tested positive for coronavirus, and the game went on. Florida State knew about it. They didn't back out of the game. So what has changed between November 7th and this past Saturday? If they felt that way, why didn't they cancel the game against Pitt? That's the big question here. If you're Florida State and you're using the whole either than now, we care about the health and safety of the players. Well, you've just admitted that maybe you don't care about the health and safety of the players 2 weeks ago, but you care about it now. And the other thing is, Florida State and every other team in the ACC, plus Notre Dame this year, all agreed to the guidelines, all agreed that they could travel with 80 players rather than the normal 72 players on a roster in case there was a positive coronavirus test in the weekend and they had to have players sit out. So the only standard was you had to have enough starters to fill a roster, and you had to have at least, I think they said something like 8 offensive linemen available. Which I don't know where that came from. But anyway, that was the standard. All those standards were met. All of the health and safety standards were met as far as the kid that did test positive for coronavirus. So it's a bad look. It looks as if they just were trying to avoid playing the game. And I don't really think you can come to a different conclusion than that.
Guess Florida State's finding out week to week how bad they've become on the field. Yeah. So prior to the Pitt game, they probably figured, this is a winnable game. We should be able to win this one. I think they were a 2-point favorite, but against Clemson, they know what's going to happen.
Right.
They got clobbered by Pitt. Who knows what the score of this one was going to be.
And then, of course, Clemson says, well, we understand your concern. We can postpone the game for a day or two or whatever it is, still play this week. And we have plenty of time between now and then to test all the players again. They refused that. So they just didn't want to play the game. I mean, I think that's really all there is to it. And so Dabo Swinney, we probably should have just taken the high road. I mean, he's not really gaining anything out of the statements that he made. But the thing about Dabo Swinney that most people know by now, some people love him for it, like myself. Some people hate him for it, is the fact that he's going to speak his mind. And sometimes he gets himself into a little bit of trouble with certain people, particularly the media. And of course, the fans of teams who don't like Clemson or Dabo Swinney for whatever reason, and there's many of them for certain people. But anyway, so he says what he says, and people can like it or not. I don't think he gained anything out of it. Honestly, I think it was an unnecessary criticism he brought upon himself. But Dabo Swinney does what Dabo Swinney does, and that's what he does.
When this is an internal thing, and this has happened a number of times going back to the summer when things happen with race relations where players were calling out coaches, I know at Oklahoma State, at Florida State, I don't like that. I don't like when you've got an issue in-house with one of your brothers. I hear all this, we're brothers. Well, if you're brothers, Pigskin, I don't know if you've got a brother, but do you call him out on social media if you got a problem with him? No, you go directly to him and talk it over.
But see, this is the problem, Mark. This is the problem with them just taking excerpts from what he said, because like you said, you haven't heard the whole thing. He said specifically that he knows for sure that the coaches for Florida State and the players would have played and probably wanted to play the game. He's blaming it on the administration, not the coaching staff or the players. So he made a very specific distinction there. So he wasn't taking a shot at Mike Norvell or the coaching staff, or certainly not the players. It was all about the administration for Florida State.
Yeah. So the conclusion of my point was that I don't have nearly as much of an issue with it because it involves another team, another program, another school. Would I have done that? I don't think, I don't have a hard and fast, like, that's wrong, don't do that, take the high road, go to them, in private. I do think that's probably the better tact, but I don't have an issue with him stating it. He was frustrated traveling his entire team down there, having to travel in a different way, meaning 9 buses from what I understand, and going to all the expense, which he cited $300,000 to make this trip. Mike Norvell made a comment about having to be able to reschedule the game in December. I don't know if he said that knowing that they might not be able to schedule it, but that, we're making an effort. We want to play the game. Let's reschedule it.
I doubt at this point the game's going to happen. Well, Dabo Swinney himself said, as far as he's concerned, and of course he doesn't make the decision. This is going to be an ACC or a Dan Radakovich, the athletic directors. They're going to make that decision. But he said, as far as he's concerned, Florida State forfeited the game, and they're not going to play again this year. And that if they did want to play them, they either had to come to Clemson because they've already put forth their travel money for the game for the year, or they can reimburse Clemson for the cost of coming down there, which was, he said, it was somewhere around over $300,000. So I don't know. We'll see it happening.
But even though Dabo and Radakovich say that Florida State forfeited the game, that's their term. Florida State did not forfeit the game. The ACC is not going to count it as a forfeit.
No, they're not going to count it. Right. Now, here's the other thing about this. I'm going to get to these super chats. Thank you, Wilkie and Byrick. In just a second, I'm going to wrap up this Dabo conversation real quick. Here's the other thing. Why isn't it a forfeit, Mark? Because if the definition of forfeit to me would be is if one team backs out and says, we don't want to play. Now, I know they're using it under the guidelines of health and safety of players, and that's sort of a blanket term. But if all of the protocols and procedures that Florida State and every other team agreed to in the ACC were met, and one team wants to play and the other doesn't, that is by definition a forfeit to me. But it's not going to happen that way. But to me, it should be.
Well, I'm making the assumption that the ACC laid it out just like the Big Ten did, which gave each individual football program an out, as was the case with Wisconsin. I believed that those should have been forfeits. The Big Ten has guidelines. They were met. They should have played. But the Big Ten, actually, I heard it stated, and maybe the ACC did as well, when they outlined their plan and their guidelines and everything, they said the individual school football program still has the opportunity and the right to say, we don't feel comfortable with whatever the situation is. We don't feel comfortable, therefore we are opting out of this game.
Yeah,
we will not suffer a forfeit.
Yeah, right. So basically, and that's what Dabo said. He said this game was not canceled because of COVID. It was the fact that they just didn't want to play the game, and that's where he drew the most heat for saying that. But and nobody will ever know the real truth about the intentions of Florida State, because nobody's going to say anything. I think in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't hurt Clemson more than, other than the $300,000 they lost for traveling there. It doesn't change their season. It doesn't change their playoff hopes. Maybe it hurts somebody's Heisman chances. If you're Trevor Lawrence, that's one less game to put up numbers. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really hurt either team. And actually probably did help Florida State a little bit more not to play the game. Because from a recruiting perspective, I mean, we have early signing period in about a month from now, and you don't want, one of the last things on the guy's mind is getting beat by 80 points by Clemson at home, especially when you're recruiting against Clemson. So, Wilkie, thank you. He says that's a dumb idea. You need to do 2 shows a week, one on each channel. I love the daytime shows. I can't stay up late for the other ones. Well, first of all, thank you for the donation. Mark and I appreciate that. Second of all, 2 times a week probably isn't going to happen right now. And the show's still fairly new. If it gains traction and does better, we will probably make a point to do it 2 times a week on each channel. For now, this is the way we're going to do it. But I thank you for your concern.
Well said.
Byrick. Thank you, sir. He says, not only did it cost Clemson travel money, but it also cost TV networks money. Sure, well, that is true. And it also cost some fans money that bought hotels and traveled there. Parents of players that live out of state. I know DJ Uyunglele's father in particular and mother traveled to all the games from California. That's a heck of a trip. So
I addressed that point about the TV contracts last night, and I don't know what they are. I worked in that industry for a long time and was privy to a lot of information regarding TV contracts and how they worked. But I don't know, because in college football, look at all the cancellations we've had, even before COVID, with hurricanes and other weather situations. But an ACC game gets canceled on ABC. They move an SEC game to ABC. They moved a Sunbelt game to ESPN. That was the trickle-down effect, and the SEC lost. The SEC network lost a game. So I don't know how that gets covered. I would think that it's a blanket, hey, we understand there are cancellations because of X, Y, and Z. And so it's not like the ACC is going to lose money from ABC/ESPN. I don't know.
I would imagine that they have built-in things for this special season, special year. Like you said, they moved over the SEC game, so they still got the ad revenue, or however that works. I don't know how it works for the individual conferences, but the TV station's not losing out on that deal, I don't think. All right, so we got that out of the way there. Bottom line is, Dabo Swinney made some people mad again, Mark.
I like Dabo. I'm good with Dabo. I did take him to task after that South Carolina game, because I basically said, I'm not going to go through it because I'm going to miss exactly what his points were. But I thought he had every right to rant. I didn't have an issue with the rant, and I cited a few points that I thought that were on point, and then a few other things that the whole disrespect card I thought was a joke and thought was funny.